Well, good afternoon. I wasn't expecting to be giving a presentation here. I came here purely to be like cotton wool and absorb as much as I could, so that when it gets to the judging tomorrow, and I'm on that panel, I've got some idea of how you think about these problems and the way you take things forward. As I was coming down this morning on the train, I was looking at the papers that had been submitted to me, and one included in this was this one with the Fishackathon challenge. And I was looking at the very first sentence there. Small-scale fishermen in developing countries face growing challenges. And they do, and this has been noted several times during the presentations today. And it's noted their catches are declining because of overfishing, and in some cases the degradation of the marine environment. Now that's serious, and that has been noted by a number of different institutions worldwide, and is obviously underpinning this particular meeting. And as I thought about that in the train this morning, I was thinking, have we got the story right? The small-scale fisheries, they are facing growing challenges. They are finding fewer fish. And I've heard it mentioned several times today that the root cause of this is large fishing vessels coming in, fishing close inshore, closer and closer inshore, mopping up the resources and leaving nothing for the artisanal fishermen. This may well be true, and it's possibly evidenced by the problems that have been present over the past decade or so with the very unfortunate situation with the Somali pirates, many of whom were suffering as a result of their fishery being ruined by the activities of others. But I thought further about that and my own experiences on this. Now, in fairly recently, actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was working on a project in the Southwest Indian Ocean, looking at the abundance of fish on the continental shelf break of Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Mauritius and Madagascar, selected areas of those, and including some offshore seamounts. The conclusions, I was using acoustic surveys supported by dropline survey. So there were two modalities there. The dropline survey gave us the species composition and also catch per unit of effort there, so that we could find out where some fish were. The acoustics gave a quantitative estimate of fish that were present. I was using, for those who understand the acoustics parlance, I was using single target detections from the echo sounder to do that. What I found was quite interesting. In the shelf break waters near to the main land masses, the main continental landmass of Africa, East Africa, and around Madagascar, the catch rates were fairly low, and the densities of fish estimated acoustically were quite low. Ironically, the offshore seamounts that I investigated as part of that study, the fish concentrations were much higher, as evinced both by the acoustics and the catches, so I was willing to believe the answers there. Now then, if fishermen are coming in illegally, that RUU fishing, as we've heard mentioned today, where would they go? The primary place that they'd move to would be the offshore seamounts, where they can't be seen from land. They wouldn't be the ones who'd be fishing in the coast. So this led me to think about what is actually happening here in the coastal zone. And there is, I understand, evidence that the artisanal fisheries, which have been active for a very long period of time, have themselves been contributing to the depletion. And one of the main issues there is possibly the advent of things like outboard motors, which allows the fishermen to go further and more rapidly offshore. Interestingly, the one area on this study off Madagascar, at the northern end near Pemba, I took the opportunity to go to the Lazarus Seamount, which was about 40 miles offshore. There, that area, the acoustic data were much higher, the acoustic counts were much higher. There were fewer fish out there. There were few fish out there, but enough, well, there weren't enough to be satisfactory. But the point was that the offshore area had a higher acoustic density than inshore. So it's suggesting that the impact on the resources was much greater close inshore. So, and I gather, talking to people at the 2012 World Fisheries Congress that I was one of the organisers for, this same sort of story was coming through, that a lot of the impact is in fact artisanal fishermen, as well as that's been exacerbated by large vessels coming in and being licensed by the member state. Now, is that really the main problem? Well, think about it a bit more, because the areas that are outside the scope of the artisanal fishermen are the ones that we're talking about being taken by the large fishing companies, and that in fact would be the reservoir that would recruit to the inshore fish area anyway. So although there may not be so much overlap between the artisanal fishermen and the large-scale vessels, there might well be an interaction there through the spatial distribution of the fish resources, which is causing this problem. So that it was something that was going through my head that we ought to be thinking about. The result of using outboard motors, they're spending more and more money on fuel and more time out on the ocean to catch enough to make ends meet. So there is a major problem there. So is the problem to really cut down on the offshore fishing by the larger vessels? I don't know. It's a political decision, and it's management of the resources. And what this group, I suggest, ought to be looking at is to try and find strong justifications, not just arm waving, but look to quantitative assessments in order to determine and justify decisions about where the system ought to be going. Now, the other thing I thought about, I looked at the previous winners in this competition. And it's a shame it's a competition, because I hope you're all winners, and I hope you all take away something from this session to encourage you to continue with fisheries science, because it's been my career and I've thoroughly enjoyed it right the way through. I was interested in a lot of people measuring catches as they come in. They're measuring lengths, aren't they? When you go to the fishmonger, how do you ask for fish? Can I have 30 centimetres of cod, please? Yeah? Or do you want half a kilo, or perhaps in the UK a pound or so? So, should we be measuring mass, well, weight for convenience here, rather than length? Is that impossible? I've seen very little mention of measuring fish weight, but I've seen a lot of mention of fish length. Now, it's quite easy to measure fish weight as you go, because there are motion compensating scales around. They've been around 20 years or so, and it's possible to do it. And if you do get length and weight together, what is one of the key factors you get? The length to weight relationship, and that, to those of you who like keeping fit, is about body mass index, isn't it? So there we go, the body mass index of our fish, you can get that. The fish condition index tells you something about the feeding and something about the ecosystem that these fish are coming from, if you continue to measure it. So those of you who are looking at just length, you're only going to do this on fishing vessels that have the technology to operate the scanning equipment. Please try and include weight as well, because it improves the quality of the information that comes forward to the people who are the people who undertake the assessments on the status of the stocks. I've seen also comments about using fish identification processes using your, I don't know, your mobile cameras or whatever. How many of you tried actually to do this properly in the field and get a decent identification beyond the general area that that's a gadaway, that's a sparid or whatever? It's very difficult, and a lot of the key factors don't come out quite so easily that way. And if you are going to do that, and photographs are important in bringing it forward, but it brings in the personal touch in order to bring it back forward. So think carefully about how you might use these items to come through. But and it may be more important to use catch data from a properly surveyed haul in order to get the catch composition, and use the photographs to assign the species, the fish, to key groups rather than going too far down into species. You saw how difficult it was to get to tell the difference between Pangasius and cod when they're in batter in the previous talk. It's quite difficult when you see it as just a fillet. It's quite difficult to tell the difference between two fairly closely related species that may have different biologies and behaviour in some of these tropical and subtropical regions. That was my experience again in the Indian Ocean. Just to finish up with, because I've been speaking for long enough already, there's been talk about Antarctic fisheries. Well, Antarctic fisheries involved me for nearly 40 years. And we're going through many of the activities of the Southern Ocean Fisheries Commission, the Convention on Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CAMALR. I hear mention of overfishing on krill. Now, where has this evidence come from? Because when I did my review on living resources in 1976, the estimates were that using the estimated consumption of krill by whales, seals, penguins and other birds and fish came to well over 100, possibly 200 million tonnes a year. The current krill catch is less than 1 million tonnes. So to worry about the current krill catch as being one that is overfishing on krill and impacting the resource is, I think, untrue. It's not reasonable. But what is reasonable is to consider the impact of the krill fishery on the local dependent species. The things like the penguins, which have a restricted foraging range during certain times of the year. They can be tens of kilometres offshore when they're feeding chicks, and it's essential that they come back. Understanding those locations and the times that they're potentially at risk is important and does involve quite a lot of people within CAMALR. And also, it's a topic of interest to myself. These ecological interactions are some that not just within the Southern Ocean, because that's where the now it's ecosystem-based fisheries management it's called now. It wasn't called that when we agreed the Convention on Conservation of Antarctic Living Resources. Incidentally, the first fisheries convention that did include this ecosystem approach to fisheries management. So it's coming forward, and it does come up in other areas. Somebody was talking, I've been talking to at lunchtime, was talking about seabirds off the north of Scotland, the interactions there. There's other areas of the world where it's coming in. It's coming in European fisheries. There is a need for a great deal of work there. Anyway, I've said enough in this little presentation. I'm looking forward to the judging tomorrow to find out how you interpret the information that's come forward, and it has been very interesting, and I'm glad I came down today. And tomorrow we'll see what's come forward. And no matter who's given the overall prize, I think everybody is a winner. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.